All right, welcome to Life Coaches Unfiltered with Desiree, Doree, and Michelle. Today, we're back for episode 2, and we're going to talk about fear and change. Why is everybody afraid of change? All right, so why do y'all think change is so scary for humans?
Oh, I have I could go all day on this one. Can I start?
Yes,
Yes,
You
go
know,
ahead.
being a hypnotherapist, one of the things that I like to do is study the mind and study all the different things. I'm a big follower of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and there is a lot more going on underneath. It goes back to our heritage of being chased by dinosaurs and afraid of change. Everything has to be stable. And so our bodies are used to being stable. And when we try to create change, the hormones in our system actually change. We're actually, as Dr. Joe says, addicted to our own hormones. So when we're in a state of yes, yes, yes. So I love this topic. So what happens is that we become used to being a certain way. The chemicals in our body, i.e., emotions and feelings and all those different things, our body becomes so used to it that we are afraid of change. So that's sort of like the chemical kind of like science behind it, which I just absolutely love. But that's kind of my intro into this, if you will.
Nice.
Michelle, do you have something you want
Yeah, I mean, first of all, people don't like change because they're thinking, well, what are people going to say about me? What are people going to think about me? What are people going to, they're going to be angry with me. Or they're going to be upset, they're going to be really upset. And, I don't want to upset them. And I'm I will say I've been there. Like, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't. I just can't. And my question is, why can't you? Where is the book that says you can't do this? Where is it written down that you can't do this? And as you said, Dory, when we grow up, then parents, they can, tweak our minds. And it's like, oh no, this goes kind of like against family values. Well, have you ever thought that the family values might not be the same values that you want to carry on into your life? And sometimes we just have to say, fuck it, let's try it. So sorry, everyone. This is the unfiltered version, remember. Um, and see what happens, and then if it doesn't work, then at least you've tried, or you can say, you know what, this change didn't it didn't it didn't work for me. But don't sit there and like, no, no, I can't. Well, what happens if it does work? What happens if you get to, for example, go and change your career and you get the interview and you get the job? Are you going to say no? So I just think that we worry about what other people think.
I love
And
that perspective.
that could be friends, family, co-workers, and they're not living your life. You're living your life. And yes, you can see other people around you and be compare yourself. But if you want to change and if you need that accountability, then go ahead. Go and try it. Go and try it. And
Yes.
stop complaining that you can't change. Sorry.
No, I'm not. You don't need to apologize. Please don't apologize. One thing that is bubbling up for me is that the when you talk about change, Michelle, it's like, oh, people are afraid of making a change. My fear is anxiety, which is what are the changes coming that I don't have control over? So
Ah,
for
yes.
me,
Yeah.
that's the like, but and then understanding it very much tying into what Dory was saying about how our bodies are wired. Our brains want predictability. They crave it. And like I recently learned, I was listening to the neuroscience of grief and I was like, this is fascinating. And they were talking about why sudden losses are so hard. And because our brains have these neural pathways and they're like, hey, this is the shortest, you got your way to work. You got your preferred path. And that happens in our brains. And so we
Mm.
expect people to be in our lives. We expect a certain cadence to be there. We expect a certain normalcy. And when that is interrupted, our brains are like, what the hell just happened? Right?
Yeah.
And so it's really frightening on like a nervous system level too. But you
Mm.
bring up a great point of like how we can walk through the world trying to please other people or so be shutter ourselves in order to feel like we need to belong and fit in. Brene Brown talks about like the opposite of belonging is fitting in
That's
and how we just need to step into our true selves and admire everybody else's true like appreciate their spirit in their authentic selves. And it gives other people permission to be those authentic selves. So I love
Mm.
what you brought up of don't be afraid of what other people are thinking.
yeah.
But you know what? I think it's hard. Like in my 20s, like I'm just going to talk about from my experience. In my 20s, I wanted to fit in,
Hmm.
and I think maybe probably graduates, I say graduates, people who are in college and have graduated and stuff, they're probably still in that frame of mind. It could have changed. Maybe we need to do a poll out there. But I think in the 20s, you just want to fit in. And then your 30s, again, for me, I had a midlife crisis and left the UK and came to the US. Not that doesn't happen to everyone,
That was a big thing.
but then I still tried to fit in and I couldn't find my way. And then I had to be comfortable with myself. And it was just kind of like, you know what, forget it. If you can't, if you don't have these values, I don't want to be with you. No, not interested. And then I think when I hit my 40s, I just was like, well, screw everyone else. It's
I was
me.
gonna, I think that that's really cool that that happened so young because there's still people in their 50s that and 60s that are afraid of that. I think that I've got the greatest coaster that said I'm at the age where I used to think, well, I'm afraid of what other people say. Now I'm of the age of let me just say it and see what happens. It's kind of like you get that kind of like what I don't give up to flying, what's, it's like it just you get to that age. But one of the things I learned when I was getting sober, one of the cool things that someone said to me was, what other people think about me is none of my business. And if I can remember that, then when I'm ready to make a change, then it makes it a little bit easier to go. Everybody's in their own world anyway. Most of the time, they're not thinking about me. I'm so like I don't know. I feel like sometimes we become so self-absorbed that we think that everybody's looking at us and thinking about
Mm.
us. Normally, people are in their own worlds anyway and don't care. So, yeah, Michelle, I think that that's a big thing, and people sometimes don't want us to change as well, though, because remember, because change within us means change within them. It changes their world too. Like when people are getting sober, it's it's a family thing. You're used to living in this family dynamic of where someone is misbehaving and drinking and people are going behind and cleaning them up or making excuses for them, and they become so used to this like paradigm of how their lives are that when that person decides to get sober, you often hear about them getting divorced,
Mhm.
splitting up, kids not talking to their parents because they're so used to living a certain way.
Mm.
Yeah, those roles are deeply ingrained. And that happens a lot during grief too. But that was my experience when I was in Al Anon. I started to change, and it changed so many of my relationships. So many
Mm-hmm.
of my relationships, not just my relationship with my spouse. And it can make things worse or it can make things better.
Yeah, yeah.
But also after a grief event, like especially after you lose someone, like this happens a lot after divorce too. People that filled those roles. So say your husband always did the finances and you get divorced or he passes. Like that is now a role that needs to be filled. And it's incredibly daunting to feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to change. And he's always done it for 25 years. And now I have to step in and do it. And am I going to do it right? But yeah, there's so much there. Um, and the interesting thing is, I remember reading this book years ago. It was a leadership book, and my manager had me read it for work. And it was about group dynamics and how a change in one person impacts the entire group. And that's
Yeah.
Hmm.
very much what Dory was just saying. So you have these ingrained dynamics of a system. One thing changes and it changes the entire way that y'all interact.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
This is such an interesting topic. I'm so sorry.
And I
so
was sitting here thinking, sorry, Desiree,
that's
go ahead.
okay.
I was sitting here thinking too, and what we're talking about too is different types of change too. So you've got the death of someone, which you all know today is actually 6 months for me today that I lost my husband. So you have a change that necessarily you didn't ask for that was kind of put upon you. And then you have the changes of, I'm going to go do something for myself and make a different type of change. But it's all the same in a lot of ways because it's an adjustment of how things are. It's adjustment inside your ecosystem and in your environment and everything around you.
Hmm.
I think the reality is that we're always, I was reviewing some notes from coach training because I had a little inkling this morning. We discussed this whole concept of the cycles. Life is a series, we're always in change and we're just in different parts of this cycle and we don't realize it. And so when you can take that perspective of life is just a series of changes and we're in a cycle, like in Al-Anon, we used to say, this too shall pass. And that goes for the good times and it goes for the bad times. And that is freaking true.
Yeah.
It is true. So what that does, my takeaway from that is to try to appreciate every moment because you don't realize the magic of those
Hmm.
moments until they're past.
Yeah.
And then you're like, ooh, I wish I had that back, or ooh, I wish I had cherished that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But life is a series of changes,
Yeah.
the ones that we choose and ones that we don't. And
Hmm.
so it's not necessarily about resisting change. It's learning how to, I don't even want to say accept because some people have a problem with that word. Accept doesn't mean you agree,
Yeah.
but to become what Shirzad Shamin talks about is being a better surfer of the waves.
A better surfer. I like that
I love
analogy.
it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, what are the common fears that you hear or like with clients that most people are afraid of, or even friends or family, like when they're going through a change?
I I think one of the things is that what you mentioned earlier is the
Mm.
unknown of what it's going to be like to be on the other side of change, and also a little bit of what's it going to take to get there. How long is it going to last? How long is it? I mean, the divide between when you start something till the finish, which we never finish. We're a work in progress at all times, always changing. But being able to go, how long is this going to take? How long do I have to, like you said, ride the wave? How long am I going to surf this and be? I think that's the unpredictability of it is sometimes the hardest, at least for my what I've seen.
I think you're asking, waiting for me to go next because
It's up to you. I've got something to say, but I don't want to interrupt.
it's okay. My mind is thinking because I'm just thinking of like all the clients, and I'm like thinking, okay, I think some of the changes, and it's gonna be very comical, so be
That's why
prepared.
you're here, Michelle.
I know, I
Your
know, I
accent
know,
and your comedy
I
and
know.
your wisdom.
Some of the changes, I think, from let's go from the emerging adult standpoint. They don't want to grow up. They don't want to adult. It's too hard. Adulting is too hard. It's too expensive, and I'll just stay at home. And then the parents are kind of like, why is this person not getting out of my house? I've given them everything that I think I need to give them. And again, there's no manual for being a parent. Plus there's no scorecard either. But it's kind of like they just don't want to make that change from being a college student to an adult and going into that world.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's just kind of like, you have to ask the questions. Do you really want to stay at home or your parents are still going to have these rules and you're going to butt heads and they may be in your business all the time and, and as far as I was concerned, 18, I was out. I was just like, I cannot wait to leave home. I'm gone. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go and live in another country for a year. That's how far away I'm going to get away from home. Last thing I want to do is sit and listen to my mother moaning and complaining how you're treating this house like a hotel and think I'm going to do all your washing for you and what? I'm out. Bye.
I love your
So,
impersonation.
so I think, it's nice to go to college and yes, they still have to be grown up and take care of themselves a little bit. But they may have parents helping them. That I know there's probably some college students that, gotta suck it up, buttercup, and get on with it. And then it's kind of like, all right, what next? And again, right now, the job market is a pile of poo. So they have no option to probably come home. But again, it's comfort
Mhm.
and they don't want to be uncomfortable.
But it still doesn't mean being at home, in my opinion, doesn't also mean that they can't have adult responsibilities and learn to become an adult while being at home. I think
Yeah.
that that's a hard thing, is because, I've seen it as well with clients, is that they come in and they still live at home and they still act childlike and still
Yeah.
expect things like the way that they were. And this, I think, comes back to the parents and their way of seeing change and being able to say, okay, I've got to, yes, they can't afford it. And it is expensive. I've got, two teenagers, 19-year-olds living with me right now that are talking about moving out. And we're looking at what is that going to cost? What does that mean? Looking at all of the different variables that can come their way. And it can be a little scary, but being able to give them more responsibility, more, things. I charge rent for my teens at home, but that's to start to teach them being on time when you're paying rent, and knowing that, hey, by the way, the water bill just went up this month, it doubled, guess what, y'all got to pitch in more, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Desiree, what about
Um,
you?
I
so that
remember,
that 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 change I think is very difficult right now. So yeah, I mean when I compare, not that I'm comparing, but I compare what I did to what students are doing now. I'm kind of like, what's going on?
well, I
What's
mean,
going
I remember my dad telling me it was like my last semester in college. No, it was before that. It was probably my last year or two in college. And he said, you don't realize how good you have it right now. Because he paid my car insurance and my health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me a stipend that I paid my rent from, but I had a job, and I would pay like my incidentals from there or whatever. But I did have it really well. And then
on?
and he was like, "You think you're going to get this big old job and everything's going to be great." And I mean, I did. I worked for a huge named company right out of school. I had great benefits. I was saving for retirement, but I was paying my own health care, my own car insurance. And you know what? That was a gut check. And I mean, I say that like not a lot of kids have that, right? Um, and but he was so freaking right. And I think that sometimes it can be really comfortable if your parents are enabling you to some degree. Like there was a deal, like as long as you're in school, we'll pay that for you, right? You're graduating, it's time for you to get out of the nest. Um, but I think it is a balance. And I've talked to some parents about like teaching your kids how to clean is actually a gift to them because they get out into the real world and they know how to do it, right? Like I wish my mom would have taught me some of the things that I wish that I knew now, right? I taught myself how to cook because I was interested in that and eating tasty food and it's cheaper to cook. But like,
And you're an amazing cook, let me just add
thank
that.
you.
It is like
Thank you, Doree.
a quiche that is amazing, so you are an amazing cook.
Hey,
So
Michelle makes an awesome quiche too. I've had her quiche.
Okay,
We should have a
Michelle.
quiche.
Challenge
A
accepted.
quiche off. A
I
quiche
will
off.
judge.
So, and quiche is like the universal food. I lived on that during my divorce because I was moving around, staying with friends, and I would just take my little quiche with me because I could eat it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It was great. It was cheap and protein packed, right? Yes.
Yes.
And tasty. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting, I think people, the discomfort and the unknown will keep you from making a change. But sometimes you're just thrown in the pool
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, I gotta figure this out.
Sink or
But yeah,
swim.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sink or swim.
I think that
totally.
for what's going on, in my world right now with my husband passing 6 months ago, we call it finding our new normal. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that this new normal is not even going to be the same this time next year. It's going to be different. So every step we take, everything just kind of changes a little bit. And I'm sure, Desiree, you've probably seen that with grieving people and having to tell them it's still not going to be the same even as you go, right? Is that what kind of you tell your people? I
I
mean,
Well, there's a couple things. So first I want to zoom out and just be like the timeline of change because you talk about you mentioned that a little bit before, like how long is this going to last, right? With grief, people I think expect to be like, oh, it's been a month, it's been a blah, or, whatever the number is, right? And they're like, well, I should be over this. Well, I'm gonna tell you, like my dad died 25 years ago, 25, 20. Oh, I lost count. 26 maybe. Anyway, he's been dead a long time. I think about him every single freaking day, every day. And there are days that I cry because I still miss him. And I remember studying with David Kessler, and somebody was like, he said something like, oh, today's the anniversary of my mom passing. And somebody said, well, how long ago did your mom pass? And he was like, 8 years ago. And they were like, oh, really? You're just still like, stewing in it. And he turned to them and he said something to the effect of like, oh, you haven't lost anybody close to you, have you? And they were like, how did you know? And he was like, because you would never say that to someone who has lost a loved one close to them. And it was so interesting because I was like, oh, he gets it, right? Where it is. So, first, be very, very gentle with yourself when you have a major change like that, even divorce. Divorce, I thought I have been through hell. I lost my dad in my 20s, right before, and I plunged on. My dad died right before I graduated from college. I had one semester left. I was about to start my last semester. And somebody came up to me afterwards and was like, I don't know how you finished that semester. And I was like, girl, I had no choice. Like, I had a job lined up. I had to start making money. Like, I needed to get on with it, right? And so I pushed myself into that, which looking back may not have been the best decision, but whatever, because I did hit some depression um later on. But I think that now I lost my train of thought. I'm like, where was I going with this? Um, but there, give yourself, so okay, back to my divorce. So going through my divorce, I thought, well, I've already been through that, and that was pretty terrible. So nothing can be as bad as that. And the divorce really set me back a lot further than I thought. And so don't go into things with expectations about what it's going to look like.
Mm.
And give yourself way more grace than you think you probably deserve because you're probably being too hard on yourself. And early grief is the first 2 years. And that shocks the hell out of a lot of people. But it's it is it is a constant. You are finding a new normal, just at like after the loss of a loved one, you're finding a new normal. A divorce, you're finding a new normal. A career, you're finding a new normal.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things, your kids moving out, you're finding a new normal. This going back to life is a series of changes, where we
yes.
are in that process. And I'd even say in some ways, like you could be in a certain cycle in your career and a different cycle in your family
Yep.
at the same time.
Yep.
And sometimes and when you're in midlife, those change cycles overlap and you just got a whole circus. You got the family stuff over here, you got the work stuff over here, you got the personal stuff over here, and it's like Barnum and Bailey's three-ring circus.
It
And
makes
then
me think about like the memes where the hair is sticking straight out. They're like, that is what I feel like in midlife sometimes is like, because you're right, it's everywhere. Sometimes it just seems like it's just all in one day. And I'm like, those are the days I go, I just don't want to adult today. I just can't. But I do because it's you never know what's around the corner the next minute, something can change.
No. And as you said, that whole circus, Desiree, and then put the whole perimenopause and menopause in that cycle.
Just
Holy crap.
Yes.
season in the pot.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's a whole nother podcast.
it is,
Seriously.
and not because it interrupts our sleep, y'all. Like, oh, Dory, I saw your post this morning. I was on my phone at 5 o'clock this morning. Dory had
I
posted something at 2 a.m. about why she shouldn't be posting in the middle of the night.
I woke up at 1 o'clock, wide awake. But and then I realized it today is 6 months since Ken passed. And so, I think even though I didn't know that underneath subconsciously, I knew that. And I woke up and was and thinking about change. Like, my post this morning was about when Ken passed, people asking me, are you going to sell the house? Are you going to move?
Oh,
What are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And
oh.
so I decided, I took the AA approach of don't make any changes your first year. And so I decided that, and I did that for me, and I did that for the kids as well, because I knew that there was going to be enough change going on that we needed at least our home to stay the same. And so, yeah, it is a crazy ride for sure.
One thing,
I can't believe someone asked you that. I'm so sorry. I'm kind of like, the
Michelle, you're
hell?
so
Oh,
surprised the things that people ask you
mhm.
when you're going through this. Like somebody the other day asked me if I've already started dating, and I'm like,
Michelle, yeah, it is appalling the things that people say because they don't know what to say.
holy.
And so sometimes, like, like I have open mouth insert foot disease pretty bad, right? But people get it like in a bad way after somebody dies. And because they're just like, oh, I don't even know what to say. And sometimes
uncomfortable.
they just blurt
Wow.
out stupid stuff. And all you really need to do to support somebody in grief is witness their grief.
That's it.
Just without judgment, just listen to them, ask questions about their loved one. Like, acknowledge acknowledge their birthdays, acknowledge anniversaries. And one thing that I think is very poignant that you posted on Facebook about the 6 months, our bodies remember, Dory. So our bodies have this like innate timeline. So around the time of my parents' birthdays and the anniversaries of their passing, like I just get this feeling. And sometimes if I'm not aware of the dates, I'll be like, what is up with me? Why am I all like
Mm.
weepy and sad? And when we understand that, we can, I mean, my sister and I were talking about it because my dad died right after Christmas. And I was like, hey, how was the date this year for you? And she's like, it was terrible. And she was like, and I tried to run away from it. Like, and it was still terrible. And she was like, how was it for you? And I was like, oh, it was pretty bad, but like it was in a way it was affirming because and even though I don't want either of us to feel that pain, um, it was affirming that I'm not crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
And so just know that it's I don't want to say it's to be expected or normal. I don't like those words. But your body is wise and trust it.
And it goes back into like what I said previously too, right? It just your body keeps the score. And I think we could have a whole podcast on this as well about how your body keeps the score of everything that's going on internally. It is the
Mhm.
mechanism that's kind of driving that kind of like is the bus, if you will, with everything that's going on inside and things sometimes we don't even know are going on inside. And
Yeah.
change is hard.
Yeah. I would say the same thing because my mother passed 24 years ago and she passed on Mother's Day, the UK
Mm.
Mother's Day. So every time it comes up, my husband's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm shot for the day. Absolutely shot.
Yeah.
Can't think of anything else. So I'm sitting here like, yeah, when it comes around March time, March 23rd, I'm a hot mess. I'm a hot mess.
And if you understand it, you can help because what happens is if people don't understand what's going on, then they just shame themselves.
Yeah,
They go into the shame spiral and they're like, well, I should. It's been 23 years, but like, like that was your mother.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
that's a big deal. Like
Yeah.
when you lose someone who is in your life consistently for years, it's a big deal.
yeah, it
And
is.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So I'm all about let's give each other grace.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let's give each other
I
grace.
love what you said to me, Desiree, when Ken passed, was you said it's also your mind trying to catch up
Mhm.
with what just happened because it goes back into like the pathways and everything. You're used to seeing that person in every day or every
Mm.
or the person that was the person you called whenever you got upset. And now there's like a disconnect of oh, I'm upset. I need to call my mom. And then there's like this, okay, well, let's call, I was riding down the road one day and something funny happened and I got to call Ken.
Mhm.
And and then because that's who I was used to sharing funny stuff with. And then, you just it hits you, oh, that's not he's not here. And so, I for me, I say it out loud anyway. I'm like, yo, Ken, let me tell you what just happened. This is something so funny. And and just still have the conversation as if he's he's still here. So anyway, but yeah, it just still having it, completing
I
it.
coincidentally we didn't plan this, but I shared that I was at a restaurant. It was about 12 years ago. Um my mom was there and my ex-husband and at the time my ex I mean we were still married. He wasn't my ex-husband then. But we had gone to see my mom because we missed Christmas because his dad had just gotten diagnosed with terminal cancer. It was a mess. Like our lives were a mess. But we went to see my mom and we go out to this little restaurant that I knew from my childhood in this tiny little town in Louisiana. And we're sitting there and there's all these signatures on the table. And I looked down and my dad's signature is in the middle of the table. Like we had been there for like 15, 20 minutes from 1985, y'all.
That's amazing. I
And
love
they had
that.
just lacquered over it, you know? And and I took a picture of it and I was like, wow. And so when I have those moments of being like, oh my gosh, like, you know, it's like him showing up and saying, I'm still here. You know, it's like those little signs. So I do believe that they are still here and they do speak to us in different ways. Um, and so I love it that you're like driving down the road and saying out loud, like, I want to share this fun stuff with you, you
Yeah.
know? So what would you guys recommend? Somebody's in the middle of change right now. What would y'all say for them? Like just drop little nuggets of wisdom. Not necessarily advice, but maybe perspectives or
There's all kinds of different sayings and things like this too shall pass and things like that. And sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it can be a little maddening when somebody says something like that. But I think that just remembering past situations where you thought that it was never going to end. And Desiree, I had it, my divorce as well that I had gone through was the same as well. It felt like it lasted a year. It was just the actual divorce part felt like it was like so far out and just kind of, and I just kept going, you know what, there's a light at the end of this tunnel. I don't know when it's going to be there. And so anytime that I have a moment of when I'm like, how long is this going to last? I remember that time and go, it did end. It did pass and it will continue to be so. Your
As I
turn.
was about to sip my tea, I was going to say, I mean, seriously.
I saw that, and that's when I just stopped.
I meant to do that.
Um, it sounds very cruel. I'm just gonna put this out there. Stop complaining that you want to make change and you don't make change.
Mm.
I mean, change is gonna happen. If you want to make change, then you have to take that first step. But we have so many people it's like, oh, I need to change this. I need to change my job. And I need to, but I can't. Why can't you?
Yeah.
Just do it. Just do it. I mean, I know we're not trying to be like Nike, but we are trying to be like Nike. But you know,
What if they don't know what, I'm sorry.
there is that. No, there is that. There is that. There is that. There is that. But you know where you have again, let's talk about it from like a friend perspective. You got the friend and you're telling them, you're giving them advice, and then they still are in the same position. And
Mhm.
and then they say to you, you know what, your life is so great. You know, I see that you've done all these change, or I see all these changes that you've made in your life, and la la la, and I just can't do it. So why can't you do it? What is stopping you? And again, it could be fear, you know, again, the unknown, but then they start complaining about it, and then they start complaining about their lives and how it doesn't match up to people and stuff like that. And it's just like, stop complaining. We can make the change. It's going to be scary, but you know, have the right people in your corner, have the right people in your corner to help you make that change, and let's maybe work together as a little group. I mean, I'm all for helping my friends anytime. Like if they need help and want resources, I'm pretty good at like here, do this. Start off with this. I guess because I'm a life coach and all that. But even still, it's like don't complain. Just take a small step forward and then you'll start seeing the changes. But don't keep on saying the same record over and over and over and over again because
Well, when you're doing that, when you're saying it over and over again like that, you're reinforcing the negative behaviors by doing that. And so that's where it's like if you want to stop it, stop the record and
yeah.
change the music.
So I know that's very harsh, but again, don't forget I'm British. So it's just like, come on,
That's why we love
get
you.
your ass in gear. Come on. Let's pull up the bootstraps, pull up your big granny pants, whatever you need to do.
I mean, I think we all need that nudge. And I
We
think
do. We do need that nudge. We do need that nudge.
people need to be, like ushered into the uncomfortableness that
Yes.
is required to make a change.
Yeah.
And like I
Doing
think about the changes in my life in the last year and how the uncomfortable things that I had to do to create those changes, stepping into
Right.
rooms where I didn't know people, speaking publicly, not knowing what not necessarily knowing. I mean, look at how we just jumped into this podcast. We're like, we
I
don't have
was
intro music. We don't have
just
outro
about to
music.
say that. I'm like, who would have thunk it that I would have been doing a podcast? Like, asked me like 5 years ago, you're gonna do a podcast? Hell no.
Desiree and her
What am I
bright
gonna say to
ideas.
people?
I
What am I
love
gonna say to people? What are people gonna listen to
Desiree.
me?
You're an adventurer for sure. I love
Listen, I, but the interesting thing is like, I'm sharing it and then I'm like, oh, I'm apologizing. Oh, well, we just get on and we start talking. But I think that the interesting thing is we just did it. We said, hey, we want to do this. Hey, this sounds fun. And we all knew each other and we were like, let's do it. And we're doing it. We're showing up and we're doing it. And sometimes that's what it takes to get the ball rolling. And one thing that I've kind of been thinking about with us starting this is there's a lot of work up front, but it gets easier as you get used to it, right?
Yes.
You get a process. So when people, they might be like, oh my gosh, this just seems so overwhelming, take the first step and then it's going to get easier. That's
yeah.
just sharing from personal
Um,
experience.
100%.
I love
Yeah.
100.
that. Putting the where we are actually putting the plane together while it's flying.
May not
Michelle's
have a
back there with her
pilot
rivet
though.
gun. What?
It
Here,
may
y'all.
not have a pilot right now, but it's still flying somehow.
Or maybe three pilots.
One of us is reading the book. Uh, we don't know how to land. It's all good. But, this has been a grand adventure. And honestly, this is the bright spot of my life right now. Like, this is a bright spot, I will say. Well, it could be the bright spot. And, I enjoy this and I enjoy getting our different perspectives. I think you guys are awesome. I think we all, have we bring different flavors to this little gumbo that we're creating because I'm Cajun, so sorry about that.
I
But
don't
I
eat
think
shrimp. I'm so sorry.
yeah,
I'll pick it out.
chicken and sausage gumbo. That's the budget gumbo. We don't put shrimp in gumbo unless you got your tax refund. Um and then it's not gumbo season, it's crawfish season, but whatever. We're not going to get into that. But
That's
anyway, I
funny.
think this is a good place to wrap up for today. We want to kind of keep these episodes under an hour, but I want to invite everybody to tune in to episode 3. We're going to be talking about, are you stuck? And if so, what can you do about it? And in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast player. You can email questions, feedback, all the things to Life Coaches Unfiltered. So it's lifecoachesunfiltered@gmail.com. And maybe we'll put together a little forum to gather questions if you guys have burning questions that you want us to explore. So until next time, we'll drop another episode in a couple weeks. We'll see y'all then.
See everyone.